IOC 100, Chapters 1 and 2. The book talks about some ways in which public speaking is different from other communication that you're familiar with, like writing or visual stuff you'll find on the internet. So, how is public speaking different? Well, it's public. It's right there in the name, but there is a sense in which it is intended to be for an audience that is not just family and friends or a couple of people at a bar or a cafe or something. That there is a sense in which public speaking is intentionally about reaching out to a wider group of citizenry. In public speaking, there's feedback, that you have an audience and that audience is reacting, and you, the speaker, can get that feedback. It's different from what I'm doing right now. I'm looking at a screen, I'm recording my thoughts and all that stuff, but your feedback as students is absent. So public speaking has that immediate feedback to it. There are clear roles in public speaking, different from, say, a conversation. That the roles are different. In a conversation, there's always roles as well. But in public speaking, there is a speaker or speakers, and there's an audience or listeners. And those roles are established and clear, basically culturally, more than anything that's overt or demanded. Those roles can be more or less formal, as you might see in public speaking, say, in the Senate chambers or something like that. Public speaking has purpose, that people aren't just blathering for no reason, that there is something behind it. There's a reason why the person is speaking. That's part of what makes it in this neighborhood of public speaking. In public speaking, there's preparation. Quick note here, as this image I really like. It's I think it's a groomsman who is writing his speech on his hand, getting ready to do the groom's speech after the wedding. I actually had this happen where I was one of the groomsmen, and the guy who was the groom, his dad was going to be his best man, and then his dad got sick and couldn't actually attend the wedding. So Chuck asked me, would I be the best man? Sure, I said. And it wasn't until we were at the reception when suddenly the microphone came out and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm the best man. I got bumped up into this position and I'm expected to make a speech. And I literally had a minute to prepare what I was going to say and not look like an idiot in this public speaking situation. So you don't always have a lot of time to prepare, but there's a sense in which you have a chance to be ready to speak in public, as different from, say, just an extemporaneous, impromptu speech, just something coming out. Public speaking is bound by space and time. There's a time and a place where it is happening, different from other kinds of communication like print communication, which is not bounded by time in the same way. It is spoken language, not written. There is a great potential for distraction in public speaking, which is different, right? There's other kinds of communication where you can really focus. In public speaking, there's all kinds of stuff that could go on that would distract you or your audience. And finally, public speaking has potential for influence. You can change the world. And I'll just note that I think that's part of the reason why we have IOC 100 at Concordia, because it fits in with our mission as a college to influence the affairs of the world. So that's part of my goal, is to help you be prepared to go out and be citizens in our community, in our culture, in our society, and use your potential for influence. So in thinking about the difference between informative and persuasive speaking, it's useful to think about there being two different types of informative speeches. So the first type is those that just help you understand something better, unpack something and help us just know what's the truth, what do we know about. Mythbusters is a great example of this. I trust you're all familiar with the Mythbusters. What do they do in their TV show? Well, they take on questions, and people want to know, is this real or isn't this? And it's typically stuff from film and TVs. One of my favorite episodes of the Mythbusters is, can a car really blow up if it's been shot in the gas tank? We see this all the time in movies, right? Where a car is driving away and somebody's standing there and shooting blam, blam, blam at it, and then suddenly the car blows up. The idea being that a bullet entering the gas tank ignites that gas tank, blows up the car, and stops the bad guys. Well, the Mythbusters in this episode, they get some kind of a AK-47 or some other kind of similar semi-automatic rifle, and they took a car and they started plugging it full of holes, right? They just started shooting at it to see would it blow up, and they're doing this from safely behind a bunker, and it doesn't work. Cars don't blow up when you shoot them in the gas tank. The gas leaks out, but it doesn't, in fact, all of itself ignite. The Mythbusters were unable to do that. So, fact or fiction? Do cars blow up when they get shot at? That turns out it's fiction. So, that's one thing that an informative speech can do, is just help you understand something better. Another thing that informative speeches do is show you how to do something. In this case, how to gap the valves on a BMW motorcycle. How do I know this? I have two. This is the, looks like the left-hand cylinder of a BMW R-Class motorcycle. I have a 1997 R1100 RT that I will talk endlessly about if you allow me to. But how do you gap the valves, right? Valves on an internal combustion engine, they need to open and close at the right time and at the right amount in order for that engine to work properly, for the fuel-air mixture to come in, for the exhaust to come out. It's very important on a four-stroke engine. And so if you are a person who wrenches on motorcycles, as I am, you don't take it into the car dealership or the motorcycle dealership to fix it. You got to fix it yourself, especially if you work on old motorcycles like I do. So you got to know how to do this. And there are lots of videos and things out there. But in fact, I could stand in front of you and give you an informative speech on how to gap the valves on a BMW R-Class. It would not probably be a very good example of audience analysis, because my guess is none of you care about how to gap the valves on a BMW R1100 RT. But that's part of the reason why YouTube videos like this exist. Point being that sometimes an informative speech is going to tell us how to do something. How do you bake a cake? How do you put a letter in the mail? How do you ship a package via Amazon? All of these things you could teach us in an informative speech. So, thinking about the difference between informative versus persuasive speaking. Persuasive speaking is trying to influence the audience, trying to make people change from the way they are to the way you want them to be, or you're trying to get them to stay the way they are, depending on how you've analyzed your audience. But you're trying to influence, you're trying to push people. Note that persuasion is not coercion, it's not forcing, it's simply trying to influence, trying to push people, lead people, help them think about things the way you think about them, but not forcing. And it can be in how they believe, in something that they're going to choose to do or not to do, what's their opinion on something, all those kinds of things. Where do we see this mostly in our culture? In advertising. We are bombarded with advertisements all the time in our culture, and these are always persuasive. Ads are trying to make you buy something. In some cases, ads like political ads are trying to make you believe something and go vote a certain way. But always there is that sense of influencing you. All right, this is in your book. I don't have, oh, I guess it's here. Page 16 is this graphic. It's part of what drives me crazy about this book, that I think this is an overly complicated graphic. But the idea behind a graphic like this is to help you sort of unpack and understand something. And there's just so much going on here. How do you read this graphic? Is it top to bottom? Is it left to right? Is it right to left? There's just too much going on in this graphic. But I think there's some useful information embedded here that they're trying to get through to us. So first of all, this notion of encoding and decoding. And so if you see here that here the the message is being encoded on the left here by the speaker, and then it's getting sent over and decoded by the listeners. So I think oftentimes we think about what we're trying to communicate, and it's just like, well, I know what I'm trying to communicate. I got these ideas. It's obvious to me. But in fact, language is coding, and in the environment of public speaking, there's more than just your words even. And so you're sending this message out across the ether to the other people who are listening and trying to get them to decode it the way you've encoded it. And of course, there's problems within there. And that's where the business here about noise comes in. You'll see in the middle here, external noise and internal noise. So both the speaker and the listeners will have internal noise. That's the stuff going on in your own head. Maybe there's an incident that's happened to you that day and it crops into your head. You've started drifting, you're not really listening anymore. There's something you're having a conversation in your head about. Maybe you had a fight with a parent. And for me anyway, when that happens, that's in my head. I'm not comfortable in that place and I want to deal with it. And so it's cluttering in my head and it gets in the way of me unpacking the code and the messages that are being sent. So there's a lot of going here, coding and decoding. Cultural reading of gestures, as I'm noting here, different cultures read different gestures differently. And so the speaker might be trying to send a particular message, including in a gesture. So maybe a thumbs up gesture. But in some cultures, that thumbs up gesture is in fact vulgar and doesn't mean what you think it is. So as I've noted here, the communication is impeded by internal and external. All right, so 3 modes of communication that the book notes that we use in public speaking. And the first one is verbal. So that's just the words you're choosing to use and how you're choosing to say things. Are you going to use the word big or the word large or the word humongous? The more vocabulary you have, the more you are able to choose the right words. So that's a key piece here. Just the words you're using is part of the modes. Second one is visual. Because public speaking has that visual component, we can see the speaker, things like gestures and facial expressions, how you stand on the platform, how you move, all those things are part of what communicates to your audience. You can be intentional about this or not intentional about it. If you're not intentional about these things, you don't control them. So part of it is thinking about how are you choosing your words? How are you choosing your gestures? How are you thinking about your facial expressions? Third one is vocal, just tone. What do you sound like? Do you sound bored? Do you sound enthusiastic? Do you sound superior and snarky? Think about Harry Potter movies and Snape. The tone that Snape uses when he's talking to Harry is really clear, right? That vocal communication always is dripping with derision. We know that Snape loathes and despises Harry Potter, and we know it because of how he speaks, the tone. His verbal stuff, the words he chooses is always careful, so he doesn't, cross a line and get in trouble. But he makes it clear in his verbal communication to Harry Potter exactly what he thinks of him. Now, just note, audience members, when they're unpacking your communication, these aren't equal. The verbal, the visual, and the vocal aren't equal. In fact, which one do they rely on least? It's the verbal. So when the audience is getting mixed messages, you're sending words, you've got gestures, and you've got a vocal tone, they are more likely to believe and listen to and follow the visual and the vocal. They're going to discount the words you use and believe the visual and the vocal. So the thing for you to think about that we will return to again in another chapter is the notion of getting these things synchronized. You want to make sure that the words you choose match up with the visuals, match up with the vocals, and all 3 of these things are working together to help you communicate clearly. So here's 6 steps that the book offers before you give your speech. And part of what I don't like about this book is it does feel repetitive. and so I'm going to be repetitive to some degree. The book, our author will return to these 6 steps again and again, as will I. They are, in fact, important. Okay. First thing is thinking about your purpose, both in general and in specific. So in general, what is your purpose with your first speech? It's to inform, not to persuade. What is the specific purpose? Well, that's going to be up to you and your topic. You're going to inform us about a specific thing. But remember and hang on to that all the way through these first 2 speeches. Really, your intent needs to be informing us. Thinking about the topic. So as okay, in general, I'm going to do this thing. In specific, I'm heading this direction, and then choosing and limiting that topic. We talked about this a little bit in our last class, just about making sure that you're not trying to cover too much. Your topic should be worthwhile for our audience. It should be interesting for us, but also then thinking in terms of scope and scale. You can't cover everything. You've got to go narrow in order to be the resident expert. Thinking about your audience is an important step. Who are the audience you're speaking to? Well, in this case, it isn't just the other 18 or 19-year-olds in the classroom plus me. Really, I want you to be thinking about the audience being our candidate, who is a professional, who is somebody probably your parents' age. What is the occasion that they're going to need this information? It's going to be out in public on the stump when somebody's going to ask them a question. Or ask them what their opinion is, or what their knowledge is on a certain area, and they need to have that knowledge. So next step you're going to do after you've determined your purpose, limited your topic, thought about your audience, is you're going to actually do some research. You've got to dig in there and figure this stuff out. Also including the, quote, opposition, unquote, right? So in every case, we're going to be dealing with stuff where it's not settled. People are not settled on whatever issue you're talking about. And the thing I want you to try to really hang on to with this notion is that the people who think differently from you on this are smart, reasonable people. They are smart as maybe smarter than you. They have access to the same information that you do. They've come to some different conclusions about what to do with that information. But they are smart, good people. So as you're digging into your research, you can't just take research and conclusions that land on the same side as you. You have to actively seek out the smart, good people who are talking about your topic, but coming to a different conclusion than you. And really, authentically, you need to figure out what makes them think that way. What is valid in their position? Because I guarantee you there are going to be valid things in their position. So this is part of your work. One thing that's going to do is it's going to open you up to their position. You will have to actually use some empathy and think about what does the world look like from their standpoint. We'll come back to this as well. I don't need to belabor this too much. Just hang on to this notion that really good, smart people think differently from you, and they have valid points that you need to understand and listen to as you grow and develop in your understanding of your topic. So when you've done your research, you're doing your research, you need to organize. Basically, put your ducks in a row, thinking about what parts need to be there, what don't. You're going to invariably end up with more material than you can cover. So what are you going to include and what are you going to intentionally exclude? How are you going to chunk or organize this information so that you can get to some level of complexity without getting too much in the weeds of complexity, but also not being too superficial. It's a really complicated task that you will have. How do you organize this stuff in order to really inform us? What are the steps we need to understand? What are the components that are there? Practice, practice, practice. Old joke. Man with a violin case hails a cab in New York City and says, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the cabbie says, "Practice." So how do you get good at this? You practice. You have to assume that you're going to be lousy at it to begin with. Even people who have done a lot of speaking, I've had a lot of students who are in like speech competition and forensics and things like that. This is different. This is different from competitive speech. This is different from having a conversation with friends. There is a formality here to this public speaking that is balanced by your own authenticity, right? We need you to bring your authentic self into a situation where you are actually practicing something. And there's a formality to it, so you could repeat it and have it be pretty close to the same thing again. So this is going to take practice. So just assume that there is going to be time you need to spend where you just go over this speech and over this speech and over this speech, changing and tweaking and figuring things out. Is it too long? Is it too short? If it's too long, what can you cut to make it the right length? If it's too short, what could you unpack a little bit more, explain a little bit more thoroughly? What is that bottom hole in the bucket with your speech that's going to make it even better? You're only going to find that through practice. Okay, so those are the 6 steps the book gives you. Figure your purpose, limit your topic, analyze your audience, and adapt your topic to that audience, thinking about your subject and the opposition in terms of research, organized. So then 4 hints in terms of actually doing that speech, the presentation part. And I know we're a couple weeks away from your first speeches. You might want to come back to this and review these hints for presentation that the book offers. First of all, positive attitude. Just if you go in with a positive attitude, it's going to change things. It's going to make your speech better. It's going to make you more engaging. It's going to make the audience more engaged with your topic. Figure out how you can have a positive attitude about this. That is on you. You're going to want to focus in terms of making sure that the stuff you're saying and how you're saying it is as concise and direct as possible. There can be a tendency to sort of run around in circles or add a lot of flowery language or something. Try to figure out how do you just really focus in and get to the point. There should be a sense of urgency within your speech. You don't have much time. You've got important stuff to say. Everybody needs to focus in because I'm going to pack as much information in here and get it across to my listeners as possible. Not too much, of course, or you overwhelm them. What is that balance? But also really using our time well. Physical. This is the inimitable Olivia Newton-John, who was very popular. She was the Sandy in Grease, the movie Grease when I was a young man. Olivia Newton-John was a big star. Anyway, there was a song she had, Get Physical. You should look it up on YouTube. Maybe I'll include a link or something. Anyway, the point here about getting physical is that your speech shouldn't just be you being a talking head. It does need to include gestures. It should include facial expressions. Maybe you move a little bit in the space as you are doing your speech. So the sense of how do you actually engage your body and become an active and dynamic speaker, because it's not just the words. We are watching you, and you can help to emphasize with gesture. You can help point out things. You can clarify stuff. All those things just with how you are embodying this. So one of the ways you can do this as you're practicing for your presentation is to use video. Use peer feedback. Have other people who are going to watch you and note if you're doing things that are distracting. Also noting, hey, that was a really good gesture that you created there. And then use your voice fully. As I've said before, you want to make sure that you are using vocal dynamics, that there are places where you're excited and your pitch goes up or your voice goes down or whatever, that you're really using your voice in a fully active. All right, here's a little fun video of Bart Simpson. It takes about a minute. Okay, a little bit of silliness there about testing, about using your voice fully. Okay, moving on. Chapter 2 is really about how to deal with nervousness about public speaking. And I really have a different take on this whole concept than the book has. So let me just offer you my thoughts here about how to deal with and think about speech anxiety you might be feeling. So first of all, think about anxiety as energy. This is, Katniss from Hunger Games. But in terms of shooting an arrow, is that you need to take your bow and you pull back on the string, and that is creating potential energy. And when you let go with your fingers, the arrow flies and goes to hit its mark. That you need to draw back the bow and have that potential energy that is created, and then kinetic energy as it goes out as an arrow. A little bit of elementary physics there for you. So I think this is a good metaphor for how to think about any anxiety you're feeling as you're heading into the public speaking situation. Think of it as energy, that your body is storing the stuff up. It's getting you ready to do something important. And it is storing that energy in your body and in your brain. And then you need to be ready to release it in your speech. Now, in the same way that you could, I suppose, muff the shot here with the bow and arrow. If your hands are, I do some bow hunting as well as firearms hunting, right? And you pull that bow, and the deer is coming, and maybe you start to shake a little bit, right? And if you shake too much, then you're not going to hit your target, right? So you have to be able to control it. But if you never pull the bow, you'll never shoot the deer. One of the ways you can minimize the anxiety and its detrimental effects on you is through preparation. So this is an image of a basketball player practicing free throws. And it's a high anxiety situation. If you watch basketball, there's times in a basketball game where shooting that free throw is really critical. And it is that single player standing on the line, everybody watching them, and trying to do this very basic fundamental thing. And so shooting a lot of free throws helps you in that moment when you actually are at the game and it's clutch time and you've got to drain it. If you've practiced a lot more free throws, then you are going to be better able to it's just natural. It just sort of flows out of you, and it's not going to hang you up. So going back to that preparation phase of the rehearsal phase of speech preparation, the more you practice your speech, the more comfortable and confident you're going to be. And so as you then face the anxiety of that moment when you do need to make your speech, and the time is there, and you stand up in front of everybody and you've got your notes, and here you go, right? Here's that sense of, here I go. If you've practiced it before, it's going to make it easier to deal with any anxiety you have. Think about your message. So one of the things that can happen when you get high anxiety is you're thinking about all your symptoms of anxiety. Your heart is pounding. Maybe you're starting to sweat and your armpits feel wet. Maybe you can smell yourself sweating, and that hits you, and you think, oh my God. If you're holding a piece of paper, maybe the paper is shaking, and the audience, that paper shaking, and then you think, oh my God, everybody can see me shaking, and you turn inside and you focus on your symptoms. It's much better to focus your conscious brain on your message. Think about, what is it I'm trying to say? Wait a minute, I've got something to say here. I'm talking about poverty. I'm talking about policing. I'm talking about abortion. And these are important topics, and it's important to me. Think about your message, what you're trying to get across, and then your conscious brain will spend less time thinking about the anxiety. So try to focus your conscious brain on your message. Finally, dealing with your symptoms. So when you are having those symptoms of anxiety, oftentimes, this is the result of having adrenaline hitting your system. And in a lot of ways, we are still the monkeys who, came out of the trees. Our base systems in our body are very much hardwired to surviving on the African savannah in a hostile world. In those circumstances where you needed to have the adrenaline hit your system in order to fight or run from the threat, all those, your body's physiology is built for that. It's built that when you are faced with a threat, you gear up to fight it in order to save yourself and your children, or you run away to save yourself and your children, right? So all those things are physical. You need to be able to have all your muscles working fast and your eyes, your pupils focus in, and so you actually have sharper vision. Your breathing changes, your heart rate amps up, you start to sweat. All those things are happening because you're ready to fight the tiger. The problem is that that part of your brain can't differentiate between a tiger and a speech. And so your body is reacting like you need to fight the tiger when all you've got to do is make a speech. So one of the ways to just deal with these physiological symptoms that you're going to have if you're feeling anxiety is to breathe. And the classic yoga breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Do it with me now. In through the nose, out through the mouth. So I did that very performatively so you could hear it, but you can also do it quietly and sneakily. Nobody needs to know that you're doing this. The crazy thing is that it works, is that when you do this kind of breathing, an intentional, deep, diaphragmatic breath in through the nose, and then releasing it gently out through the mouth, it cues your body. It cues your body that the threat is past and things are going to be fine. So that it then tells your body, that part of your brain that's dealing with this stuff says, oh, okay, we don't need so much adrenaline. We don't need to have our heart rate so high. Everything can cool off. We're cool. Everything's chill, right? So you can actually trick your body into stopping some of those symptoms by just taking that breath. This is kind of inside baseball, right? I'm telling you guys this, and then you're going to go do it. What I suggest to you is don't perform this yoga breath for the class because you don't want to show the work. So if you are actively trying to and deal with your anxiety as you're preparing to speech, don't let us know that you're trying to do that. Fake it. Chances are excellent we won't know whether you're feeling anxious or not. The symptoms you're feeling, the stuff that's going on between your ears or in your body, it is in fact mostly hidden from us. Or if we notice it a little bit, it's nowhere near as magnified as you think it is. So pretend everything's cool. Act like you've got it in the bag, like you've practiced this for a week and you are so ready. It's much better to fake it and succeed than broadcast all of your problems and succeed. You've got to really just take it as an acting gig. It's you that you are performing. You are being yourself on stage, but it's you on a good day. It's you when you got all your ducks in a row. That's the you want to bring to your speech. Okay, I'm not sure if this is the last